Before we begin this video, we wanted to give you a quick update about our new Hit the Lights podcast. It's now available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. At the moment, we're uploading daily and using previous long format videos that we've converted for podcast listening. Once we've used up all those, we'll be testing out some new exclusive podcast content. We will also no longer be uploading our Cold Case Detective main investigations onto the Cold Case Detective YouTube channel, but these will instead be exclusive to the podcast. So don't forget to subscribe to the Hit the Lights podcast by clicking the link in the description or in the comment section below. Also consider becoming a Patreon for just $2 per month, where we upload lots of long format content, such as our new documentary on Jim Jones. If you're interested in our Murderous Minds documentaries and all of our other documentaries, then please consider becoming a Patreon. Now, let's get started. In these extraordinary times, we thought we would help you pass the days by suggesting some subjects that will take you down the internet rabbit hole. None of them are too obscure, and they can all initially be found on Wikipedia. What we have done is given you the bones of the cases so that you can do a bit of sleuthing that will lead you through the many twists, turns and theories that have appeared on various sites about these cases. You can then piece it all together and shed any light on what really happened. What we would like to do is a follow-up one day to see if any of you have been able to solve any of them. So here are 5 creepy Wikipedia rabbit holes that, believe me, will keep you busy for hours. The disappearance of John Favre. John Favre lived in Howard Beach, New York, and he was a neighbour of Gambino crime family godfather John Gotti. The two families got on well, and Favre's adopted son Scott was a friend of the Gotti children and even had sleepovers at their house. Favre was also a close childhood friend of the son of Gambino crime family, Ettore Zappi. But as the pair grew up, Ettore pursued a life in organised crime, while Favre remained on the straight and narrow, earning a legitimate living. Despite this, the two had remained close. However, all this changed on March 18, 1980, when 12-year-old Frank Gotti, the youngest son of John, darted into the street on a motorised minibike from behind a dumpster. At the time, Favre was on his way home from work, and his car struck Frank and killed him. Everyone was devastated, but no charges were ever brought against Favre, as Frank's death was deemed as an unavoidable accident. But the Gotti family would not accept that. As far as they were concerned, Favre killed Frank, and in the months after the accident, the word murderer was spray painted onto Favre's car. Victoria Gotti, Frank's mother, also attacked Favre with a metal baseball bat. Although Favre decided not to press charges and planned instead to move away. But on July 28, 1980, shortly before the family were due to move, witnesses saw Favre shoved into a van by several men near his work. There were several accounts of his abduction, ranging from him being beaten with a baseball bat, shot with a silenced .22 caliber pistol, or both. What happened to him next, though, is unknown, although there are many theories. One report says that while still alive, Favre was dismembered with a chainsaw and stuffed into a barrel filled with concrete, then dumped in the ocean or buried on the chop shop lot. Others believe that mob hitman Charles Carneglia killed Favre and disposed of his body in acid. No one really knows what happened to Favre, although we think it's safe to say he met a grisly end. Soon after his disappearance, Favre's wife and 2 sons moved out of Howard Beach, and he was declared legally dead in 1983, despite his body never being located. However, in November 2004, informants led the FBI to excavate a parking lot in New York City, suspected to be a mob graveyard and the site of Favre's body. While 2 bodies were found, Favre's was not. When questioned by 2 detectives on Favre's disappearance, John Gotti said, "I'm not sorry the guy's missing. I wouldn't be sorry if the guy turned up dead." His wife Victoria mirrored this by saying, "I don't know what happened to him, but I'm not disappointed he's missing. He killed my boy." But because Favre's body has never been found, and with its links to the mob, the case has spawned various theories about what really happened to Favre and where he lays now. With this case, Wikipedia is just the start of a very long and winding rabbit hole that will frustrate you all the way, and despite various internet sleuths wading in on the investigation, the case still remains unsolved. The disappearance of Schneeher and Philip. On Monday, September 10th, 2001, 31-year-old Schneeher and Philip had the day off work. The internal medicine intern planned to have a quiet day tidying her New York City apartment. Her husband Ron said goodbye to her and left for work at around 11 AM. At about 2 PM, Schneeher spoke to her mother through Facebook Messenger, on and off until 4 PM, when she signed off to do some errands. After dropping off some dry cleaning, Schneeher headed to Century 21, a discount department store close to the Twin Towers. She used her husband's American Express card to buy some clothes, lingerie, and bed linen. She also purchased 3 pairs of shoes. When Ron came home from work that evening, his wife wasn't there. This wasn't unusual, as she often stayed out all night, often without telling him. However, when he woke up the next day and she still wasn't home, and he hadn't heard from her, he was a little annoyed, and intended to have a stern word with her when she did eventually turn up. As Ron headed into work that morning, he would have no idea what was about to unfold in the city he called home. Soon after he arrived at the Jacobi Medical Center, where he worked as an emergency room intern, the news started to filter through that a plane had struck the North Tower of the World Trade Center. Ron immediately called home, but Schneeher didn't answer, and as she didn't have a cell phone, he left several messages on the answer machine, but she never called back. At 3 PM, Ron hitched a ride back to his apartment in an ambulance to look for Schneeher, but the journey amidst frantic traffic took 6 hours. It was 9 PM before he reached their apartment, but the front doors wouldn't open due to an electricity failure, so he couldn't get in. Ron spent that night on a friend's couch with no idea where his wife was. When he finally entered their apartment, grey soot coated every surface, but there was no sign of Schneeher or any evidence she had returned there. Just the tiny paw prints of the couple's 2 cats could be seen in the dust. After her disappearance, Schneeher's family did their own investigation and eventually began to accept that she most likely perished in the 9/11 terror attacks. They even strung together a theory based on the small circumstantial pieces of evidence a private investigator had uncovered, that maybe Schneeher went out for drinks after she went shopping, and knowing Ron was working late, decided to spend the night at her friend's house instead. As she returned home the next morning, the first plane struck the North Tower, and using her medical experience, she rushed into the towers to help the victims. Her brother John took this theory one step further, when he concocted a scenario of her final moments, live on WABC, stating that he was on the phone to his sister and she told him she couldn't leave because people were hurt. She said, "I have to help this person," and that's the last thing I heard from her. This was a complete fabrication, as Schneeher had fallen out with her brother and they hadn't spoken for weeks. The family's theory had a lot of holes in it. However, the version of events was how Schneeher's family wanted to remember her as a hero, and her name was added to the list of 9/11 victims missing. In the months following the tragedy, the family sought comfort in the special community of grief surrounding 9/11, and on the first anniversary of the attacks, her parents went with their 2 sons and Ron to a memorial in Poughkeepsie, where Schneeher's name was read aloud as part of a tribute to local victims. They also routinely attended memorials and discussed their loss with others whose loved ones were heroes and martyrs. However, police investigations revealed a different story. They later uncovered a very different version of Schneeher's life, one that makes her family very uncomfortable. Police reports and court records describe a life that was reeling out of control, with alcohol-related issues that saw her fired from her job. She'd also been involved in a dispute that landed her in court. Schneeher was also experiencing marital problems and often stayed out all night with individuals not known to her husband, whom she met at various lesbian bars. According to the investigations, Schneeher's indiscretions appeared to have reached breaking point in the months prior to her disappearance. A police report says that her brother John walked in on her and his girlfriend in bed, and that is why they weren't speaking. and her alleged struggles with depression, alcohol, and her sexuality spilt over into a new job as well. At the time of her disappearance, she was suspended for failing to meet with her substance abuse counsellor. On the day she disappeared, Sneha had a court date, where she pleaded not guilty to the charge of filing a false complaint. Ron went with her before he left for work, and the couple got into a big fight, and Sneha stormed out of court, leaving Ron behind. Then came another blow for the family, when in 2004, it was ruled that Sneha officially died on September 10, 2004, as set forth by state law 3 years to the day after her unexplained absence commenced. Her name, that was previously on the list of 9/11 victims, was removed. To date, police still do not know what happened to Sneha, but her secret double life and struggles with her dark side had cost her a job and damaged her marriage, and may well have led to her death the night before the terror attacks. Despite this, Sneha's family are still trying to shape her legacy and trying to prove that she died virtuously and a hero. Of course, there is still a slight possibility that she might be alive and living a new life somewhere, but the fact that Sneha left behind her glasses, passport, driver's license, and credit cards seemingly rules out this theory. Under New York law, establishing that a person died as the result of 9/11 requires clear and convincing evidence of the person's exposure to the attack. If the mystery is to be solved, it will likely be through DNA evidence or items of jewellery, although again, this has not turned up anything. We have not told the whole story of Sneha's disappearance, as it's too long to fit in this list, but if you want to look a little closer at the case, Wikipedia is a great start, and Reddit in particular has a dedicated thread to this case. The mystery of the Toynbee tiles. Toynbee tiles, as they have been named, have been found embedded in the roads and pavements of several major American cities since the 1980s. But what is their purpose? What do they mean? And more importantly, who put them there? While no one seems to know, and trying to find out will lead you down a confusing rabbit hole full of cryptic clues and theories. Since the 1980s, several hundred tiles have been discovered. They are generally about the size of an American license plate, but sometimes considerably larger. They contain some variation of the following inscription. Some of the more elaborate tiles also feature cryptic political statements or urge readers to create and install similar tiles of their own. The material used for making the tiles was initially unknown, but evidence has emerged that they may be primarily made from layers of linoleum and asphalt crack sealant. The first tiles were discovered in Philadelphia, but since then they have also been seen in several other cities, including Pittsburgh, New Jersey, Chicago, Boston, Washington DC, New York City, and even South America. However, in 2011, the installations appeared to stop, and many speculated the original tiler had maybe fallen ill or even passed away, or that they had become unnerved by the attention caused by a 2011 documentary called Resurrect Dead: The Mystery of the Toynbee Tiles, a film that presents evidence that a reclusive Philadelphia resident, Severnio Werner, was responsible for the tiles. However, whatever the reason, in the last few years, new tiles have started to appear again in New York and Philadelphia. The tiles are generally laid in the summer months, and it's believed that after the design is created, the tiles are wrapped in tar paper and then put into position and stuck to the ground with asphalt sealant. The weight of car and foot traffic combined with heat help to gradually fuse each tile to the street and wear down the tar paper, revealing the messages and images carved into them. No one is certain about the length of time it takes for a tile to fully adhere to asphalt, given that there's no telling exactly when one has been laid. But given the material used, it's assumed the installation can take 2 weeks to a month to complete. Followers believe that the original tiles are created by one person, and that they are laid simply by being thrown out of a hole in the floorboard of a car, a theory that was suggested by Resurrect Dead. This could explain the puzzling placement of some tiles, and could be the reason no one has ever laid eyes on the tiler. Toynbee tile spotters is a thing, and enthusiasts share locations and blogs on ones they have found, as well as theories on the cryptic messages found on them. Many believe they are linked to Stanley Kubrick's film 2001, or the Ray Bradbury short story Townby Convector, about a time traveller who returns to the present to inspire his contemporaries to build a future for themselves. A name that comes up a lot in the search for the creator of the tiles is James Marasco. He is the founder of the Minority Association, a group that hoped to be able to colonize Jupiter by resurrecting those who had died on Earth. And in the Resurrect Dead documentary, it is suggested that Severano and James are the same person. This belief has been reinforced in recent years, when in addition to the main messages, tiles began appearing with additional side messages attached to them, such as "Murder every journalist, I beg of you," as well as longer tiles found with accounts of how the media had wronged the tiler. This could be in reference to Marasco, who has contacted newspapers and talk shows to discuss his hopes to colonize Jupiter, but has been pretty much laughed at. One thing is for sure, the tiles bring out people who love a good mystery, and the Resurrect Dead crew has enjoyed being able to meet those people at speaking engagements and hear from them via their Facebook page. Watching the documentary is a great place to start with this puzzle. Danny Casolaro. At about noon on August 10th, 1991, housekeeping staff entered room 517 of the Sheraton Hotel in West Virginia, where they discovered the body of Joseph Daniel Casolaro, an American freelance writer. Joseph was naked in the bathtub and his wrist had been cut. He had 3 or 4 wounds on his right wrist and 7 or 8 on his left. Blood was splattered up the walls of the bathroom, and the scene was so gruesome that one of the housekeepers fainted when she saw it. Underneath Joseph's body, paramedics found an empty Milwaukee beer can, 2 white trash bags, and a single-edged razor blade. There was also a half-empty wine bottle nearby. Other than the grisly scene, the hotel room was clean and orderly. On the desk was a pad and a pen, and a single page had been torn out, with a message written on it saying, "To those who I love the most, please forgive me for the worst possible thing I could have done. Most of all, I'm sorry to my son. I know deep down inside that God will let me in." Initially his death was ruled as a suicide. However, Joseph's family were convinced he had been murdered, and they revealed that before he left he had told his brother that he had been receiving harassing phone calls late at night, and some of them were threatening, and if something were to happen to him while in Martinsburg, it would not be an accident. They also noted that he was well known for being squeamish and had a fear of blood tests, and they found it incomprehensible that if he were going to commit suicide, he would do so by cutting his wrists. At the time of his death, Joseph was working on a story he called The Octopus, and he was in Martinsburg to meet a source to put the final pieces together. Joseph told people The Octopus was nearly ready, and it would reveal a wide-ranging conspiracy involving the following already known cases. The Inslaw case, about a software manufacturer whose owner accused the Justice Department of stealing its work product. The October surprise theory that during the Iran hostage crisis, Iran deliberately held back American hostages to help Ronald Reagan win the 1980 presidential election, and the collapse of the Bank of Credit and their funding of Iran-Contra. But in the papers that Joseph left behind, it appears he had got in over his head during his investigations, and they found an array of old clippings, hard-to-read handwritten notes, and the names of former CIA officers and arms dealers. It appeared Joseph had been drawn into the lives of spooks, guns, drugs, and organized crime. In the wake of his death, a number of unexplained things occurred, and vague, unsubstantiated rumours about the mafia being involved circulated. It was also claimed that the undertaker who removed the body was an employee of the CIA, hired to clean up after an agency assassination. It was even suggested by a journalist colleague of Joseph that he may have intended his suicide to look like murder triggered by his research in order to have others look into the story after his death. Even at the funeral, the family felt engulfed by mysteries. As the ceremony drew to a close, a highly decorated military officer in US Army dress reportedly arrived in a limousine, accompanied by another man in plain clothes. The military man approached the coffin just before it was lowered into the ground, laid a medal on the lid and saluted. The speculation was so rife that it was later revealed that members of the FBI task force had questioned the conclusion of suicide and recommended further investigation. Another anomaly is that FBI documents show that some files on Joseph are being withheld from public release, which is contradicted by the FBI, saying these files were missing entirely. As with all these cases, there are just too many unanswered questions about what Joseph was about to reveal and how he met his untimely death. This one is a real challenge, and we'd be interested in knowing what you discover. There are several online resources for researching this case, including Reddit and Wikipedia, as well as several books and podcasts on the subject. The strange disappearance of Emma Philippoff. Emma Philippoff is a Canadian woman who has been missing since November 28, 2012. 26-year-old Emma was last seen near the Empress Hotel in Victoria, British Columbia. Since that day, no one has seen or heard from her. Here we look at the timeline of her disappearance and her seemingly odd behaviour in the days and hours leading up to it. Emma arrived in Victoria in the fall of 2011 from Perth, Ontario. She had brief employment at the Red Fish Bluefish seafood restaurant, but because the work was seasonal, Emma left the job on October 31, 2012. However, she assured her co-workers she would be back in the spring. A week after, on November 21st, Emma hired a tow truck to move her Mazda from Souk to the Chateau Victoria parking garage. Police believe this was in preparation to move back to Ontario. Unbeknown to her family, Emma had been staying at the Sandy Merriman House women's shelter on and off since February 2012. On November 20th, Philippoff was captured on security footage at the Victoria YMCA, entering then leaving, then entering multiple times, as if possibly avoiding someone on the outside. Take a look. A few days later, on November 28th, Emma was captured on a 7-Eleven store video on Government Street, purchasing a prepaid cell phone. The video showed her hesitating in departing the store, seemingly checking the street outside. She later returned to the same store to buy a prepaid credit card for $200. Reportedly, she left the Sandy Merriman house at around 6 p.m. that day and hauled a taxi and asked to be taken to the Victoria International Airport. However, she didn't have enough money to complete her journey, which seems strange as she had just purchased a $200 prepaid card. Later, Emma was seen walking barefoot in front of the Empress Hotel. An acquaintance of hers, Dennis Key, spotted her and was concerned about her behaviour and called 911. Victoria Police arrived and spent 45 minutes speaking with her, before deciding that she was not a threat to herself or anyone else. This was the last sighting of her. In the days preceding her disappearance, Emma had phoned her mother in Ontario asking to come home. On the final call, her mother became aware that Emma had been staying at the Sandy Merriman house, and even though Emma had asked her not to come, she made plans to fly out immediately. Emma's last words to her mother were, "I don't know how I can face you." Emma's mother arrived at Sandy Merriman house at around 10 p.m. on the 28th, 3 hours after the last sighting of her outside the Empress Hotel at 8 p.m. When it became apparent Emma was missing, police met with her mother, and by midnight Emma was classified as a missing person. Until a report surfaced in June 2018, no one reported seeing Emma since 8 p.m. that night. Later that evening, police met Emma's mother at Sandy Merriman house. Investigators explored more than 200 leads, turning up little or no information, although most of the evidence indicated she was planning to return home to Ontario. Although there was no proof that she had ever left Victoria, the cell phone she bought was never activated. The prepaid card was allegedly found on the side of the road near the Huandi Fuka Community Centre, north of where she disappeared. It was found by a stranger whose use of the card to purchase cigarettes was tracked by police. Her red 1993 Mazda MPV was found in the Chateau Victoria parking lot with almost all her belongings in it, including her passport, library card, digital camera, clothes, a pillow, assorted ornaments, laptop, and recently borrowed library books. It's believed she used the van as storage. During her time in Victoria, Emma wrote extensive poems about her time there. None of them indicated that she was being stalked, although some indicated she was depressed, although experts believe she was not suicidal. However, the Sandy Merriman staff told Emma's mother that her daughter required both physical and medical intervention. No new leads turned up until May 2014, when it was reported that Gastown, Vancouver business owners Joel and Laurie Sellen witnessed a man in their store throwing out a $250,000 missing reward poster for Emma. The pair said that the man said, "It's one of those missing person posters, except she's not missing, she's my girlfriend. And she ran away because she hates her parents." The Sellens immediately called the police, but despite security video capturing an image of the man, he is yet to be identified. Then in the summer of 2018, a witness named William came forward with new information about encountering a woman fitting Emma's description the morning of her disappearance. The report resulted in an organised search of the View Royal area of Victoria in December 2018, but the search turned up no additional clues. Emma's disappearance has received extensive print and web coverage, both in Canada and abroad. In 2013, Emma's disappearance was the subject of an episode of the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation television program The Fifth Estate, titled Finding Emma. And in 2020, Emma's disappearance was the subject of a long-form series by the Canadian audio documentary series The Nighttime Podcast, titled Emma Philippoff is Missing. This series features interviews with Emma's mother Shelley, many of her close friends, and the one-time suspect Julian. This series was the featured podcast on Apple's podcast for the weeks of January 12, 2020, and appeared in the top 10 of Canada's podcast charts for several days. Both of these are must-see productions to start you off if you want to get drawn into this baffling case. We are hoping Emma is still alive, and one day she will turn up safe and well, and maybe one of you can help with that. So that's 5 big mysteries that will lead you down the rabbit hole, and occupy you for hours as you conjure up your own theories and thoughts on these cases. Thanks for watching, stay safe, and as always, we'll see you in the next video.